The morning sun poured gently through the thin, worn-out curtains of a small house on the edge of an African village. Birds chirped outside, their melodies pure and free, unlike the heart of the young girl trapped within those walls. Her name was Amara. At 16, she had known more sorrow than most do in a lifetime. Since her mother's death, life had become a daily struggle, painted in loneliness and pain. Her stepmother, Lydia, treated her not as family but as a burden she was forced to bear. Lydia was a woman of charm and false smiles, known in the village for her elegance and sharp tongue. She loved her husband's 2 children from her previous marriage dearly, but to Amara, his only child from his late wife, she showed nothing but disdain. When Amara's father traveled for work, Lydia's cruelty knew no limits. The poor girl would rise before dawn, sweeping the compound, washing clothes, fetching water, and preparing meals for everyone, only to eat the leftovers, if any remained. But this particular morning was different. Lydia stood at the gate with her bags neatly packed, her sunglasses perched proudly on her face. Her 2 children, all dressed in bright new clothes, jumped into the car with excitement. They were heading for a week-long vacation in the city, a trip Lydia had planned for months. Amara stood at the doorway, holding the last bag, her eyes filled with silent longing. She hadn't been invited. "You'll stay behind and take care of the house," Lydia said sharply, snatching the bag from Amara's hands. "Don't expect me to come back to a mess. And don't think about touching my things." "Yes, Ma," Amara replied quietly, her voice trembling as the car engine roared to life. She watched as dust rose behind them, swallowing the car until it disappeared beyond the horizon. Then silence. Only the whisper of the wind and the ache in her chest remained. Days passed. The house felt larger and emptier than ever. Amara went about her chores in quiet obedience, though each night she would sit on the veranda, looking at the stars, whispering prayers to her late mother. "I wish you were here," she would say softly. "I wish someone loved me the way you did." But fate has strange ways of listening. On the 3rd night, a storm rolled in from the hills. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder shook the roof, and the sky cracked open in blinding flashes. Amara ran around trying to seal the leaks, shivering as water dripped down her back. Suddenly, she heard something, a faint cry outside, carried by the storm's howling wind. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then she heard it again, a weak, desperate whimper. Without hesitation, she grabbed her lantern and rushed out into the storm. Her feet sank into the muddy ground as the rain pounded her face. She followed the sound until she reached the gate, and there, lying beneath a tree, was a small, trembling puppy. It was drenched, shivering uncontrollably and barely breathing. Amara scooped it up in her arms, wrapping it in her shawl. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered, holding it close to her chest. She brought it inside, dried it by the fire, and gave it some milk. The puppy's eyes met hers, soft, grateful, and full of life. From that night, Amara wasn't alone anymore. She named him Keto, meaning precious. Every morning, Keto followed her around as she worked. When she sang softly while scrubbing the floor, he wagged his tail. When she cried quietly at night, he would rest his head on her lap, as if to say, "You still have someone who cares." Days turned into a week. Lydia and her family were due to return soon. Amara had cleaned every corner, polished every surface, and made sure everything was perfect. But then, just before their return, a knock echoed through the house. It was strange. Visitors rarely came when Lydia was away. Amara hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. A tall man stood before her, dressed in a dark coat, his face hidden beneath a wide hat. "Good evening," he said in a deep voice. "Is Lydia home?" Amara shook her head nervously. "No, sir. She's away on vacation." The man sighed, his expression unreadable. "I see. Then you must be Amara." Her heart skipped a beat. "How do you know my name?" He smiled faintly. "Because your mother was my sister." Amara froze, her mouth slightly open. My mother?" "Yes," he said, removing his hat. His eyes were gentle, filled with recognition and sorrow. "I'm your uncle, Daniel." I came as soon as I found out what happened after your mother's passing. Amara could barely speak. She had never known she had any family left on her mother's side. Her stepmother had always told her there was no one, no relatives, no help, no place to go. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped back, her heart racing. Daniel looked around the humble house, his jaw tightening when he saw the worn bedding and Amara's rough hands. "You been living like this?" he asked softly. She nodded, ashamed to meet his gaze. Without another word, he said, "Pack your things. You're coming with me." But Amara hesitated. "I can't. If stepmother comes back and I'm gone, She's not your keeper," Daniel interrupted firmly. "You've suffered enough. Your mother wanted you to live, not to survive." That night, for the first time in years, Amara slept soundly in a warm bed under a roof where kindness lived. Daniel's home was in a nearby town, far from the gossip and cruelty of the village. He was a man of means, respected and compassionate. And when he introduced Amara to his wife and children, they welcomed her with open arms. Yet even in this new comfort, Amara's heart ached for something she didn't understand. The memories of her late mother and the years of mistreatment had carved scars too deep to vanish overnight. But she was learning to smile again. A month passed before Lydia returned. When she entered her home, she found it spotless as always, but strangely silent. "Amara," she called. "Come out here, lazy girl." No response, only the echo of her own voice bouncing off the empty walls. Then she noticed a letter neatly placed on the table. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It was written in Amara's delicate handwriting. "Dear stepmother, thank you for everything, good or bad. Every pain you gave me taught me to survive. But I've learned now that survival is not enough. I deserve peace, too. Please don't look for me. I am safe and I am finally free." Lydia's face turned pale. She dropped the letter, her throat tightening. She had expected the girl to always obey, to always be within her reach, weak and voiceless. But now, even the walls of her perfect home felt colder without the quiet footsteps of the one she had called a burden. And while Lydia stared into that emptiness, Amara, miles away, stood beneath a setting sun with Keto by her side and a gentle smile on her face. She felt the wind brush her cheek, warm and soft, as though her late mother's spirit whispered, "Now, child, your life truly begins." But destiny was not finished with her story yet. For just as peace began to bloom, something or someone was about to return, carrying the past she thought she had escaped forever. Amara stood in the garden of her uncle's home, her fingers grazing the petals of white lilies that swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. The sun filtered through the leaves above, dappling her face with warmth and light. Keto barked softly beside her, chasing after butterflies and running in small circles, his joy infectious. For the first time, she felt what peace could be, the kind that didn't come from silence or endurance, but from belonging. Yet deep inside her heart, an uneasy hum lingered, a quiet voice reminding her that peace rarely comes without a test. Her Uncle Daniel noticed a distance in her eyes that day. "You're thinking again," he said, setting down a tray of fruit on the veranda. "Your thoughts are heavier than the sky." Amara smiled faintly. "Sometimes it feels like my past is standing right behind me, waiting for me to turn around." Daniel studied her carefully, his gaze gentle yet firm. "You've been strong, Amara. But remember, running away from pain doesn't heal it. You must face it when the time comes. And when you do, it will no longer have power over you." His words stayed with her, echoing in the corners of her mind like a prophecy. Because 2 weeks later, that prophecy would come true. It was a calm evening. The air smelled of rain, and the sky darkened into a soft purple dusk. Amara was setting the table when the sound of wheels crunching on gravel reached her ears. She glanced outside, expecting Daniel to return early from town, but instead, she froze. A sleek car she recognized too, had stopped at the gate. Lydia stepped out. Her stepmother's elegance was intact. The same fine clothes, the same expensive perfume, but something in her face was different. She looked thinner, paler, her confidence wilted. Her eyes darted nervously as she scanned the compound, and when she saw Amara, Her mouth opened slightly, as though she'd seen a ghost. "Amara," she whispered, stepping forward. Amara's hands trembled, but she didn't move. Keto stood alert beside her, sensing her unease. "How did you find me?" she asked quietly. "Your father told me," Lydia said. "He came back from his trip and found you gone. He's been furious at me ever since. He searched everywhere until someone told him you were with your mother's brother. He sent me here to bring you home." Amara felt a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Home," she repeated, her voice cracking slightly. "That house never felt like home to me." Lydia flinched. For once, she didn't have a sharp reply ready. I know I wasn't kind to you," she said, her voice trembling. "But you must understand, Amara, after your mother died, everything changed. Your father was distant. The bills piled up, and I didn't know how to handle you. You were a reminder of everything I wasn't." Amara looked into her eyes and saw something she had never seen before. Not arrogance, not cruelty, but guilt. Real, aching guilt. Daniel came out to the veranda then, his expression guarded. "Lydia," he said curtly, "you have some nerve coming here." "I didn't come to fight," she said quickly. "I came to ask forgiveness and to make things right." Daniel folded his arms. "You made her life a prison. Forgiveness isn't a door you can unlock with a few words." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "I know, but I had no peace, Daniel. Not a single day since you left. My children ask where she is. My husband barely speaks to me. The house feels empty, cold. She was the one who made it warm, even when I didn't see it." Amara felt a strange heaviness settle over her. The woman who had once ruled her with cruelty now stood broken before her. And yet, a part of her heart, the part that had always longed for love, softened. "I don't hate you," Amara said softly, "but I can't go back to that life." Lydia nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Daniel watched silently, his expression unreadable. When Lydia turned to leave, Amara called out, "Wait." Lydia stopped, looking over her shoulder. Amara walked up to her, holding something in her hands, a small bracelet, frayed and old. "You gave this to me once," she said. "On my birthday. You probably don't remember." Lydia looked at it, her eyes widening. "I do," she whispered. "It was the only thing I could afford back then." Amara smiled faintly. "Then maybe there was love somewhere in you, hidden under all that pain." Lydia broke down then, tears spilling freely down her face. She reached out, but Amara didn't move closer. Instead, she said softly, "Go home, be better for them, and for yourself." Lydia nodded slowly, pressing her hand to her mouth to stifle a sob before turning away. When the car drove off into the fading light, Amara stood for a long time, staring at the dust it left behind. Daniel came to her side and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Maybe," Amara replied. "But why does it still hurt?" "Because you have a kind heart," he said. "And kind hearts always ache a little when they forgive." That night, Amara sat by her window, gazing at the moonlit sky. The world felt lighter somehow, though a part of her still wrestled with the emotions she couldn't name. Keto rested at her feet, snoring softly. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what freedom feels like, not forgetting the past, but finally being able to live beyond it." In the days that followed, Amara began helping at the local school, teaching little children to read and write. She had always loved books. They had been her secret escape in the long, harsh years with Lydia. Now, watching the children laugh and learn, she felt as though she was finally shaping a new story, one that belonged only to her. But destiny, as always, had more to say. One afternoon, while walking back from the school, Amara saw a crowd gathered near the market. The air buzzed with whispers, and she sensed something was wrong. As she drew closer, her heart sank. Lydia's car was parked by the roadside, its front bumper crushed, smoke rising faintly from a hood. Amara pushed through the crowd, panic seizing her chest. Lydia sat on the ground, dazed but alive, a small cut on her forehead. Her 2 children stood nearby, crying softly. Without thinking, Amara ran to her. "Lydia, are you hurt?" Lydia looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Amara, you came." Amara knelt beside her, helping her up. "You need a doctor." Tears welled in Lydia's eyes again. "No, I just lost control of the car. The brakes failed." "But how did you?" "I heard people shouting," Amara said, steadying her. "I couldn't just walk away." Lydia stared at her, trembling. "After everything I did to you, why would you help me?" Amara met her gaze calmly. "Because that's what my mother would have done." The words hit Lydia like a wave, and for the first time, true understanding dawned in her eyes, a realization that love and forgiveness were stronger than any power she had ever tried to wield. As Daniel arrived with help, and Lydia was taken away to rest, Amara stood by the road, her clothes stained with dust, her heart strangely still. For the first time, she felt that the circle of her pain had closed. Not with revenge, not with anger, but with grace. Yet as the evening sun dipped behind the hills, she sensed another chapter stirring, a new twist in her fate waiting to unfold, something that would once again test the strength she thought she had fully earned. The days after the accident flowed like soft whispers of fate, each sunrise weaving a quiet rhythm of healing into Amara's life. Lydia and her children stayed in the town for recovery under Daniel's care, and though their presence filled the house with an awkward silence at first, the distance between them slowly began to fade. It was as if destiny had chosen that accident not as a punishment, but as a bridge, a way to bring closure to wounds that had bled for far too long. Amara often found herself in moments of reflection, watching Lydia from afar. The once proud woman had changed. The sharpness in her eyes had dimmed, replaced with something fragile, human. She spoke softly now, choosing her words with care, as though each syllable was an apology. Her 2 children adored Amara, trailing behind her wherever she went, asking for stories, songs, or help with their lessons. It was strange, the way life could twist the cruelest past into a thread of connection. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with gold and crimson, Lydia approached Amara while she was tending the garden. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was deep, but no longer heavy. Then Lydia knelt beside her and began helping to plant the seedlings, her manicured fingers clumsy in the soil. "I used to think strength was about control," Lydia said quietly, her gaze on the earth, keeping everything perfect, making everyone obey, showing no weakness. "But now I see strength looks nothing like that. It looks like you, Amara. It's quiet, forgiving and gentle, yet unbreakable." Amara looked at her stepmother, the woman who had once been her tormentor, and she saw no shadows left in her eyes, only truth. She smiled faintly. "Strength also means knowing when to let go. Maybe we both had to learn that." They sat in silence after that, 2 women bound by pain, growth, and the strange mercy of time. The wind whispered through the garden, carrying away what little resentment remained between them. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into something resembling peace. Daniel often reminded Amara that the universe had a way of restoring balance when one chose kindness over bitterness. Yet, beneath her calm, Amara felt a pull, a whisper of purpose calling her beyond the walls of her uncle's home. She began volunteering at the village orphanage, her gentle spirit quickly winning the hearts of the children. Many of them reminded her of her younger self, eyes full of dreams but clouded with uncertainty. She told them stories about courage, forgiveness, and the beauty of second chances. The children listened with wide eyes, unaware that the stories she told were fragments of her own life. One afternoon, as Amara read beneath the old baobab tree, a journalist from the city arrived at the orphanage to cover a feature about community heroes. He was drawn to the young woman, whose voice could quiet even the wildest crowd of children. His name was Tund, a man with a keen mind and an unshakable sense of purpose. He listened as Amara spoke, her words soft but filled with conviction. After the interview, he lingered. "You speak as if you've lived 100 lives," he said with admiration. Amara smiled gently. "Perhaps I have, just not the kind written in books." They became friends, often walking together through the dusty paths of the village. Tun was fascinated by her strength, by how she had turned pain into peace. And slowly, as the days turned into months, admiration blossomed into something deeper. For the first time, Amara found herself laughing freely, unafraid of joy. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of dusk, Tun looked at her and said softly, "You've spent your life giving light to others, Amara, but even the brightest star deserves its own sunrise." She felt her heart tremble in ways it never had before. She had never imagined love could feel like this. Not the desperate hunger she had once mistaken for affection, but a steady flame that warmed rather than burned. Their bond grew, and soon the entire village spoke of the girl who had suffered so deeply yet carried herself with grace, and of the man who loved her not despite her scars, but because of them. Daniel watched with quiet pride, knowing his sister's child had finally found the peace and belonging she had been denied for so long. Lydia, too, found her redemption. She returned to her husband and children, but not to the woman she once was. She opened a small shelter for young girls who had lost their mothers, funding it in Amara's name. When asked why, she would always reply, "Because one girl taught me that forgiveness can heal what even love cannot." Years passed, and Amara's life unfolded like a song. She and Tun married under the old baobab tree, where her journey toward freedom had truly begun. The entire village came to celebrate: Daniel, Lydia, the children, and even elders who had once pitied her. As she stood before them, draped in flowing white cloth, her smile radiant, the crowd fell silent. In that moment, she wasn't just Amara, the poor girl left behind. She was a woman who had turned sorrow into strength, who had faced cruelty and answered it with grace. When the time came for her to speak, her voice carried across the crowd like a soft melody. "There was a time I believed my life was written in pain, that my story would always be about being unwanted, unseen, unloved. But life is strange. It teaches us that even the cruelest chapters can lead to beautiful endings if we keep turning the page. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from the weight that keeps you from flying. My mother used to say that destiny never forgets those who keep faith, even when the world turns away." Today, I know she was right. The crowd erupted in applause, but Amara's gaze went to the horizon. The same direction Lydia's car had vanished years ago, the same path where she had once stood alone with tears in her eyes. Now she stood tall, unbroken, with love at her side and peace in her soul. That night, as the celebration faded and the stars emerged one by one, Amara and Tun walked hand in hand through the quiet garden. Keto, old but loyal, trailed behind them. Fireflies danced in the air, and the moon bathed the earth in silver light. Tun looked at her, his voice soft. "Do you ever think about how everything led here? The pain, the loneliness, the storm that night?" Amara nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes. Sometimes I think destiny speaks in storms. We just have to be brave enough to listen." He smiled, pulling her gently into his arms. "And you, my love, listen better than anyone." They stood in silence, the rhythm of the night pulsing softly around them. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of children's laughter drifted through the air, a melody of innocence and hope. Amara closed her eyes, letting the wind carry her mother's memory through her heart one last time. The world, once so cruel, now seemed vast and kind. She realized that everything she had endured, every tear, every wound, every lonely night, had been shaping her, preparing her for this very peace. Years later, when people in the village spoke of Amara, they didn't speak of the stepmother who left her behind. They spoke of the woman who turned abandonment into purpose, pain into compassion, and tragedy into triumph. Her orphanage grew into a beacon for the lost and forgotten, and children across the land found shelter in her arms.